And let's bring in Jim Barker now. And I want to tell you, Coach, if I may be so bold, I really enjoy the chats with you because you do get to the nuts and bolts of the football and not the crazy Taylor Swift, John Taffer, Carrot Top stuff. Although these championship weeks, as you know, are just as much about that as they are about football, right?
Distractions. We talked about it. Both teams are staying at Lake Las Vegas, which is about a 30-minute drive from Las Vegas. Both teams are away from it. We talked about the distractions last week, and being down on the Strip it's just too much. I mean, you got to remember, these guys are professional football players, but they're most of them 22 to 30-year-old men who, to be out in Las Vegas would be a tall order. So they took them out to Lake Las Vegas, beautiful place out there, and then bus them in for practice and that type of thing. So keeping the distractions to a minimum for the players is crucial.
Well, I'm glad you went there because you saw the 49ers don't like the playing surface they've been asked to play on.
No.
You've been following that. I'm guessing you don't blame them. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, again, UNLV, it's the Fertitta complex is a nice complex, but last year they had the East-West Shrine game there, and the practice fields were so bad. I think that's why they moved it to Frisco, to the Dallas Cowboy facility this year. So, again, those are the things you deal with. You hope that your people who have gone out and seen it have taken care of it to make sure that it's okay. Again, that it got out, that they weren't happy with it. I can guarantee you that they're trying to just downplay it. But those are the kind of things that happen. You just never know when you're the Western team playing in a Western place. Although they're the NFC and the Raiders are the AFC, so I would bet that they got second choice of the facilities to work out on. But that's the way that stuff works. Like in ours, if it's in the East, the Eastern team has priority on the locker room and the training facilities and all those things that you don't think about. So there's a bit of an advantage to the Chiefs being the AFC team, if that's the way they do it. And I'm sure it is. It's got to be AFC, NFC. And so because it's an AFC team hosting it, they get the first choice on practice facilities, on hotels, on everything. Because I know when we were in the East coming out West to play, we always got stuck in basically the third hotel, because the league takes the number one hotel, and then the West would, if they was in the West, they would take the number two hotel. And you go some places, the number three hotel is not a great option, but in some of the Canadian cities. But that's the way it works, and I'm sure that's the way it works in the NFL. So. That field I know was a disaster last year when I was there for the East-West Shrine game. And I would have thought they would have come in and redone it prior to them getting here. But, again, it'll have no factor.
Well, I want to just go into that a little more. We'll talk about some CFL stuff in a second. But I guess the commissioner went out there on his own. It went all the way up to Roger Goodell. He walked the field and he said, "This is very playable. Enough." And it was deemed fine. I mean, how much do you know about this?
Oh, well, again, Roger Goodell, his whole thing is keep fires put out. He doesn't want Lamar Hunt or Jed York, either one of them, on his phone saying, "How could you put us on this practice?" He doesn't want to do this. So he goes out and, I guarantee you, he wouldn't know a good surface from a bad surface. That's the nature of commissioners. He's trying to keep Jed York happy. That's what he's doing. That's what commissioners do.
I love it. Thank you. And let's talk about the actual matchup, if you don't mind, in terms of. Yeah. I won't ask you who you think will win, but I want to ask you what will be the biggest factors. And because this is a championship game, does it change what would be a normal game?
Well, I'll answer both questions in one. I'm going to take the Chiefs, and not just because of Patrick Mahomes. I think the team that is able to run the ball and continue running the ball is going to win. I thought Baltimore Ravens got away from it way early. I think the Chiefs had a great advantage playing in an ice-cold game in Kansas City, the coldest game in NFL history, week 1. So you're going to run the ball. Then they go to Buffalo, and same thing. They're going to run the ball. It was typical Buffalo weather. They go to Baltimore, and again, the running game was what's key for them. Again, Andy, I've talked about this before. Andy and I come from the same roots. We worked at San Francisco State for a guy named Vic Rowan, and we were right down the street from Bill Walsh. And Bill Walsh was one of the first people to basically take football, and you take one play and run it from 15 different formations. Well, Andy has taken that now to just a different level, and he's got 15 different formations from 4 different position groupings. So it's basically all just kind of a mirror. What he did in terms of what he's doing with those tight ends and creating all those gaps in football, every time you put a guy on the edge of the line of scrimmage, you create a gap, a new gap. And what that does is change what's called in football jargon, primary run support. You change the guy who does that. You now have another gap you have to defend. So as those guys are moving and doing that, it forces defenses into very vanilla types of things. And that's what Andy's doing. He's running, double tights. He's running a tight end and a wing. He's running a tight end and a wing, take the wing over to another tight end, completely changing the strength of the formation and the gap issues. And that's the big thing, is gap issues. Is the basic premise in football is you don't want to leave 2 consecutive gaps uncovered. Well, when you get all these tight ends and wing backs and things along those lines, I mean, what Bill Walsh did, he took Jerry Rice and Dwight Clark and tightened them down just so they could create a gap. Now, they're not going to block the way that the tight ends in this game, the Kittles and the Kelseys and all these guys, they block at a different level. But they still create the gap by their positioning. Bill Walsh was the first guy to do that. And Andy is, again, we used to go up and spend time when Bill Walsh was at San Jose State, then he was at Stanford. And that was what he always talked about, was you need to find a way to camouflage what you want to do. And he's running a few basic plays, but he runs them from so many different sets, and the gaps change with every formation change. And that's why I give them the advantage. Now, San Francisco, they're going to run a lot of double tight. They're going to do a lot of things like that. I don't know if they'll have the same kind of discipline. I think the reason Kansas City, they've done it out of necessity. They lost all those receivers, and I think that they become a better team every week from about 3 to 4 weeks to go in the season. They were struggling, but they became better because I think Andy looked at it and said, what do we have to do for us to win the Super Bowl? And I think he saw it back then, and they've progressed to the point now that I think that they're going to be able to run the ball and continue to run it. And even though it's going to be indoors and those kinds of things, in these kind of games, that's the kind of thing that wins. I guarantee you that neither one of these teams want to drop back and sit there. I mean, the 49ers, they have Bosa on one side, Chase Young on the other. They're upfield, vertical. They're at their best getting upfield. But when you're getting upfield and you're getting lateral runs at you and you're getting Mahomes moving behind you, that's tough for those guys. And I think that Chase Young had a tough game last week. I mean, he's had 2 straight games that have been brutal. I mean, Aaron Jones just had his way with the Packers. And then last week, I thought the Lions did a fantastic job and got away from it a little bit. Maybe panicked a little bit. But again, that's why I give the Chiefs an advantage. I think their defense is, again, more prepared to play the run. And I think their offense they started about 6 or 7 weeks ago getting this offensive package put together.
I could talk about this Super Bowl stuff all day, but in the time we have left, I should ask you about the CFL. The tampering window, the legal tampering window has been open for a couple of days, and I don't understand it because I'm not a GM. But it kind of feels like free agency is open because it's reported that Jermarcus Hardrick leaving Winnipeg for Saskatchewan, Pickett leaving the Argos for Ottawa. Can you explain what's happened here the last couple of days in the CFL?
Yeah, what they do is they agree to terms. And I can tell you that if they're not on the phone every day with those guys, with somebody, a coach, somebody has to be on the phone every day because nothing is done. There was a player, and I'm not going to mention his name, who committed to a place yesterday and then last night changed and then ended up re-signing back with his team. So those kind of things happen all the time. You can't stop during this period, but it does give teams an opportunity. It gives players an opportunity to see what their value is. The Hamilton Tiger Cats, today they announced that they've come to terms with Brandon Barlow, and it hasn't been announced yet, but we can put it out here. They've also come to terms with Dwayne Hendricks. So they've taken two players off that from that defensive interior, and then you throw Jordan Williams in there. It's that gives them three upfront players from the old Argonauts from last year going to Hamilton. So Hamilton's very active. Again, these guys have just agreed. Now, Jordan Williams was a trade, so he's their property. But with Brandon Barlow, they better stay on the phone. And same thing with Dwayne Hendricks. They better stay on the phone. I remember 2 years when I was there with Pickett. Well, that was last year. With Pickett we had to keep him on the phone. And there was one time on Saturday, I think it ended on Sunday, and then signing starts Tuesday, because a team has one full day where you're not allowed to talk to him to try to re-sign him back, the original team, where it got dicey. We thought we were going to lose him, even though he had committed to us, and we put it in the paper. They want it out because they want to put that kind of pressure on the young man who agrees to terms. So it's an interesting time. Jermarcus Hardrick got a lot of money to go to Saskatchewan. They feel like, I believe, their offensive line is a player away, obviously. And he's going to be one of the highest paid offensive linemen in the league. And, he's 32, 33 years old. And, he was with the BC Lions and has been successful there. But that's an interesting early agree to.
So basically, they threw a lot of money at Hardrick. Saskatchewan did. He goes back to Winnipeg and says, "Can you match it?" And they're like, "No, we can't." So then you're okay to announce it. Is that the way it?
Well, no, you can announce it. You can announce it regardless. What happens is the agent goes back to the team and says, "We have this offer," and the team says, "Well, we can't go over this," and then they'll call back and they'll tell the player, "Okay, if you go back to Winnipeg, this is the most you can get, and here's what you can get if you want to go to Saskatchewan." And you don't know with a guy like that. They may have been talking to Hamilton or to Toronto, not Toronto, but Montreal, who you just don't know. And he'll go back to those teams, get the very best offer he can, and then it's a question of commitment. And so he'll shop the offer to all the teams, and then take that, and that's what they'll agree to is, we're going to come there. And that helps teams with, okay, we have a good idea. We have this guy, and this guy. We know, for example, Hamilton signs these guys. Jameer Thurman he's said, "I'm going to Saskatchewan. I've agreed to terms with them." So again, there's nothing in writing that puts them there. They can still go back and sign with their team. The signing doesn't happen until, I believe, it's Tuesday. So it's a very interesting way to do it. It was happening anyway, and they just made it legal so that now you don't have to cheat. So that was probably about 5 years ago. Yeah.
Well, we covered pretty much all of it. Jim, I thank you again for the chat the other day. Thank you for the connections in Vegas. We'll chat with you when we get back. Enjoy the Super Bowl.
You have a blast.
Plan on it. Thank you. With Jim's help. Jim Barker's presentation with us is presented by EMJ Marketing Speakers Bureau. Look him up. Ask for Joe at emjmarketing.com.